What I'd like to do right now is introduce the two-color palette assignment. The two-color palette is an assignment that the student will select two complementary colors. It doesn't matter which complements they select, it's just whichever two they would prefer. Example, red and green. And then once they have those two complementary colors selected, they're going to create what we refer to as a dot study. A dot study is a color palette in which the artist mixes certain colors together to get a reference color palette, meaning that they will refer back to that palette as they make their composition. And so a dot study palette is a great tool for the artist. What it does is it allows the artist to mix different colors together, color themes, color schemes together, and kind of visualize the colors first before they use them in their composition. So they'll know that they'll be successful with at least the color that they use, since they can use the dot study as a color reference. And so if it looks good at the dot study, then it should be look great in the final composition as well. And so that is what the students are going to do here. You'll create your dot study palette, and then you'll use that dot study palette as a reference for a final composition that you'll create. And that final composition can be of any subject, and so it can be representational, it can be abstract, it can be non-representational as well. And so it's up to the students choosing. I would encourage you to pick a representational image and allow yourself to be more expressive and more painterly with that composition. And so so far through the semester we've been a little more exacting in the way that we apply the paint to the surface of the paper, but in this case I encourage you to be more spontaneous with the paint. Paint wet into wet, alla prima would be that kind of technique, and be this, overall more expressive of the way that you put the paint on. And so a lot of times double loading the brush and stuff like that will create really nice effects in the composition itself. You can kind of see that here in this composition. The student created this kind of vignette effect by combining the screens and this yellowy greens and more white. And it kind of creates a very dynamic, illuminated kind of quality. You'll see this a lot in photography, I should say, in which the photographer will create kind of a darker outer shadow effect and then have the person in the portrait backlit, and so it kind of illuminates the person. And so it's an old painter's trick in which brings the focus onto the item that you want to be the subject there. And so anyway, so we're going to create a 15-step dot study. And so for this dot study, the first step you want to do is, of course, pick your two complements, whichever you would want them to be. And then you want to mix them together and try to achieve the darkest tone possible. So up here with this example, the student used blue and orange. And so when you're mixing blue and orange together, what the student achieved is kind of this dark kind of teal tone. You can maybe mix a little bit more orange, maybe a little more green, but you want the background to be the darkest tone possible so that the other colors that you mix will stand out from that. If it was a middle tone or a very light background color, as you mix the other colors and you put them on top of the palette, you'd be obscured, you wouldn't see them as well. And so we want that background to be the darkest possible, and then mix your colors and they'll stand out from that, and they will contrast from the background. Now for the actual composition itself, it does not have to be a dark background. Some students just choose that anyway. But you can be inventive with the background. You can have it lighter, darker, whatever it needs for that composition that you're making. And so it's your choosing. But for the dot study that we're going to use for your color reference, we want the background to be the darkest tone possible. And so here, darkest tone possible for the background. And then once you have that background painted in, it's going to be a 6x6 area. And so this is 6 inches by 6 inches. The paper is 12 by 18, and the dot study is going to be 6 by 6. The final composition at minimum needs to be 8 by 8. It can be different ratios. It could be 9 by 7. It could be 10 by 6. As long as it fits on the paper that you have. If you want a rectangle more than a square, if you want to be more inventive and maybe do a circle or a triangle or something like that's fine. As long as you can get it on there and it looks good in the end. That's I always says, as long as it looks good in the end, that's what we want to see. Anyway, and so have your dark tone on there. And then what you want to do is, as you mix the colors, you want to make sure you get a broad range of value and a broad range of temperatures. And this should be easy to achieve because as you pick your complement, you're going to have one warm color and one cool color. And so if you pick yellow and violet, you'll have very warm colors when there's more of the yellow into it, and there'll be much cooler colors, of course, when you have more of the violet in. And so really kind of explore the temperature range, the warms, the cools, and of course the light to darks as well. And so that'll allow you to be ultimately successful in the final project if you really show yourself what you can achieve. A lot of times the students, as you mix your complements together, it's very kind of shocking, I guess you would say, or it's kind of like, aha. As you mix these colors together, and you see with these blue and oranges, you get all these different green tones and beige tones that you wouldn't necessarily think you would achieve with blue and orange. You can take the burnt orange or the teal color being desaturated from straight blue or straight orange. But when you get in that middle there, you get a nice range of kind of greens. The blue and orange looks great for landscape studies as well. And so the blue and orange is always really successful. You can see these two students here chose blue and orange as well. And so it's a very inviting color palette that really is just successful every time you use it. So here we have, as I said, this student, the blue and orange, and so these students here, this one selected an image, I think it was from National Geographic, and they traced the image down and then used the blue and orange to create this kind of nice color palette here. You can see here in this larger balloon all these nice kind of green tones. The background is mostly blue to white. And the individual hot air balloons, the smaller ones, as they look like they progress in the background, use different kind of grayed out, greeny, bluish tones, and it really kind of achieves a spatial kind of distance in it. Here, the student, really nice little still life set up. It was a photographic image of a teacup with oranges, and this student painted it with the blue-orange palette and was very successful with that. And so here's red and orange. You can see that very little bit of the red, straight red, was used, but for these shadows, the student definitely had the red mixed into it in order to achieve these darker tones. Because when you put complements together, you get more lifelike natural shadows, and that's what they're achieving here. And then this chocolate color, this is the red and green mixed together with white as well. And so a few more examples. Red and green here, it's kind of a cartoony version. It was her and her cat, a cartoony version of it. Here we have the red and green, or excuse me, it was blue and orange. And the student actually kind of broke the rules of the assignment and did the palette with blue and orange and did majority of the composition with blue and orange, but also went in with a couple spots there and put in some red tones as well. In order to have the flowers is what they did. But as you can see here, you can pick any kind of subject matter that you would like and choose whichever complements you want. And so remember, no black paint. We're strictly sticking to the two complements, whichever complements you select, and then the addition of white. And so that white is going to give you a nice range of value when you mix it. Because when the complements go together, they usually make the color mixture really dark. And so adding the white is going to brighten it up a lot. And so that's what we want to achieve for this assignment. One other thing to note is that at this point in the semester, sometimes your students are getting low on the paints that they purchased originally for the semester. And so if you want, you can go buy, if you want to buy artist grade paints, you can still purchase other of the Liquitex basics or some of the more artist grade Liquitex or golden acrylics as well. I have a few here. Examples of paint that from Walmart, and the name brand is Apple Barrel. And these are acrylic paints, and they work really well. I don't know how archival they'll be compared to the Liquitex, which is guaranteed, I think, for 200 years. But these should do a great job as well. Students have used them quite a bit in different assignments, and so. If you an inexpensive alternative to the Liquitex paints, which are $6, $7, $8 a tube, these are sometimes 99 cents, sometimes maybe $1.50, $2, and there's a whole assortment of different colors that you can purchase from Walmart and Michaels in this Apple Barrel brand.